Hi everyone, this is Leatherass for StoxPoker.com. Today I'm making a video two-tabling the micro limits. So I have two tables going at 10 cent, 25 cent on PokerStars, and I would like to discuss a lot of the ways that I think you need to adjust to beat these sort of games. A lot of the things I normally do might work well for some limits, but you really have to always be adjusting depending on what games you're playing in order to beat them. So I'm just going to show you what some of those adjustments are that I'd make. So I'm not going to have any numbers today. I have the poker ace on just in case we get some numbers, but I don't expect to get a whole lot, or to have any, I should say, because I can't imagine I would have sat with anybody from here. So King 6 suited, I'm going to call here just because of the suitedness and the size of the pot at this point and my implied odds. So I flop nothing, and chances are I don't see any reason to go on any further here. I think for the most part I'm just going to be looking for some spots to get involved in pots where I have some really good implied odds, and probably for the most part play fairly tight. Let me get these sounds off. Okay. Yeah, I more than likely am not going to be able to run over the table and really take charge of that, because the biggest mistake that players of these limits make is that they call too much. So it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense if I just tried to bluff people all the time, because I wouldn't be exploiting their biggest mistake. Although I don't know anything about these particular players, for all I know, I'm at a table that plays a lot more solid, and maybe I can run them over, but chances are, as we notice on the screen on the right, I get two limpers and on the left, so I hardly doubt that that's the case here. Queen Jack suited, I'm just going to go ahead and check my option. Alright, so I turned the nuts. I think what I'm going to do is try to go for a big check raise, and maybe somebody will have a jack and I can get it all in with him. I'll probably check raise and make a huge overbet. So that's what I'm going to do here. I can't imagine anybody here is going to let a jack go in this spot, probably not even a 6. So I'm just going to make a big check raise and just try to get all the money in, hopefully. I'm not going to let that club scare me. I'm just going to continue with my overbet and just shove it all in. Alright, that's exactly what happened there. So yeah, he had a jack, and I can't really fault him there a whole lot. I mean, the only thing he was behind there was Queen Jack. And I guess on the river, the clubs beat him, but I can't imagine he's going to put me on that at that point. Probably just put me on a jack or maybe some kind of bluff, and I don't know. If I were him, I might have called me too. But I didn't see any reason to not go for the whole stack there, because if he had a jack, he was going to go broke. At some games, I can get away from a spot like that because I just figure that the guy's not going to be bluffing very often, and so I'm going to be calling to try to split the pot, and I likely would have folded to that big overbet check raise from a good player. But again, him not knowing anything about me, he probably needs to just call me down there. So the game's three-handed. Hopefully we can get some more players in here. I'd like to just play six-handed, so that way the action doesn't go too quick, and I don't have any reads on anyone, so I'm probably not going to play them as well as I normally could. Sixes here, the guy has $4, so I guess that's still a decent number of blinds, but I think I'm just going to shove it all in here. I can't imagine what another option would be. I mean, I could check, but it seems kind of weak, and raising to 2 and leaving $2 left or something like that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me either. So ace-7 suited, I don't think that it would be too wise for me to call here. I don't really like calling with a hand like this out of position. I don't like 3-betting it because, again, the mistake that players at these limits make is that they call too much. So I think by default that leaves me only with a fold. So I really think just a good solid tag style is really the way to go in these games, and you know, when possible, just kind of paying attention, and like that hand with the jack there, just making sure you get all the money in and just kind of feeling out the situation. Making overbets on these guys is sometimes a good deal. I did a lot of overbets when I was playing. I never played this low, but I played 50 no limit when I started, and I did that for a while, and I won something like 15 big bets when I played at that limit, and I did so not being even a tenth of the player I am today. And I also, I don't think I really played more than like say a 17-13 style. I certainly wasn't lagging it up or anything. It was just pretty simply pushing my strong hands for value, and I think that's a very good way to exploit these games and a good way to practice your post-flop skills for when you need them at the higher games. This board is a little too draw heavy for me to bet out here. I feel like I'm just going to get looked up by a lot of stuff, so I just gave up there. So here's a spot where I'll have implied or I have good implied odds. I'm in position on the razor, and likely bowler will come along, so I'm just going to call here. And he is just a touch over 100 blinds deep as well. So now we have a limp re-raise. I'm more than likely going to have to let this go, although it is a little tempting now, but it's somewhat of a large raise to be calling. I'm really trying to compute these numbers and what this all means relative to the blinds. So I have to call basically like 12th of my stack. I'm just going to let this one go here. I'm so used to playing the 5-10 and 10-20 and stuff like that that sometimes just seeing $2 it looks like an easy call, and I have to pay attention to just what that means in terms of blinds, so I make sure that I'm not doing anything stupid. So I'm going to make sure to reload here to the max. Always like to keep the account reloaded to 100 blinds. I have to figure that I have edge on anybody I'm sitting here with, so I certainly, if I'm going to play a big pot, I want to have a full stack to do so. So I definitely recommend when you feel you have an edge at the table to go ahead and keep your stack at 100 blinds at least at all times. Deuce 3 suited, I'm just going to let this one go here. Another reason to keep it at 100 blinds is that most of the strategy we discuss in the forums sort of pertains mostly to 100 blind stacks. For everyone that may be watching this video that plays on Absolute Poker or some of the deep stack tables on full tilt, I do want to say, because it's actually something I've been thinking about and noticing a little bit in the forums for people who do play those tables, a lot of the strategy that we talk about, in fact 99.9% of it, is all for 100 blind stacks. And when I say certain things in the forums, it's always under the assumption that they are 100 big blind stacks. 7-4 suited and min raise I'll just call here. And I'll probably just give up here. So I actually recommend, I know this, it's not always going to make a whole lot of sense because sometimes you might be with really bad players, but I would really recommend, if you do play an Absolute, to just play 100 blind stacks for now, while you're still kind of learning and getting the hang of everything. Even as a pretty solid player, if you are still trying to progress your game, I don't think playing 200 blind stacks all the time is the way to do it, just because the advice you get from everyone is so much different. You have to ignore, the pushing all in with draws and all these things that you can do for 100 blind stacks. It just becomes not a good way to play in deep stack poker. I'm just going to follow up here when I made top pair. I really think that it's important to sort of understand 100 blind poker, and then you can move on from there. Or excuse me, how to play 100 blind poker. I feel like I played 100 blind poker, and then without even really realizing it, I just switched to Absolute because it had a good rake back deal, and now I was playing 200 blind poker, and I feel like it maybe hindered my progress just a little bit, just because the advice I was getting on certain, I just couldn't use all the advice that people were giving all the time, because it was, most everyone talks about 100 blind poker, and this was 200 blind poker. So I wish I kind of would have just focused. I'm just going to call it the jacks here, and I'm going to raise the kings. I have position on the jacks. This guy is somewhat tight. Looks like we have numbers now. So I just want to, I'm just going to play my position, try to flop a set. I don't want to raise and get 4-bet and have to fold my hand. And here I'm just going to let this go with the jacks. I do have an inside straight draw, so it's somewhat tempting. On the kings, I'm just going to go ahead and follow up with like $3 and a 380. But my straight will be obvious if I make it. On the kings, I'm just going to shove here. If he has a set, good for him. He might. He quick called. So we'll see. No. So that's good. So it's the kind of things you see, I guess, going broke with top pair there. Queen kicker. Kind of missed this stuff. I'm not gonna lie. You wouldn't get $5 from the guys I play with a hand like that. Ace-3 here, I'm gonna fold. Yeah, getting back to what we're saying with Absolute Poker, it's just, I really think, first of all, not a whole lot of people have gone into, I'm going to call with the king-queen here. Not a whole lot of people have really taken the time, really, even to sort of perfect the art of playing 200 big blind poker, so I certainly haven't. I don't know anybody, of my poker buddies that have, so I just don't think that you're going to always get the best advice, and also when you're in the forums looking at stuff and trying to pick up tips, a lot of what you pick up isn't going to be applicable to what you play. So I really recommend just playing 100 blind poker, and then, you know, if you want to branch off into something like 200 blind poker, that's good. I mean, if you had a super fish who's going to go broke 200 blinds deep with top pair or something, you certainly want to be deep with him, but you know, for the most part, I kind of like just playing 100 blind poker. So what I did was I just let out as sort of a semi-bluff with my club draw. And the theory behind that is if I bet, I have a chance of picking up the pot if they all fold. I'm going to fold the 5-9. I also am building a pot for when I do hit a club flush. So I have two sort of, you know, ways to pick up the pot there. So I'll have to admit, this table here on the right is kind of depressing me a little bit. We have VPIPs on 3 of the players here, and they look like the mother of all rocks here. And I'm playing $25 no limit, so I guess we can thank the U.S. government for that. That's really shocking to me to see these, you know, these rocks at $25 no limit. I thought, you know, I just would expect to see a bunch of 60 VPIPs. But on the table on the right, it looks like I'm going to try and run it over a little bit because these guys are all really tight. The 10s, I just kind of played them passively again, similar to the jacks. And this flop is really bad for me, so I'm just going to fold it. So King Jack's plenty of hand to open from the cutoff there. And so I'm going to go ahead and lag it up a little on the right and see if we can't create a little action from this table. We did have these two guys on the left here kind of just came in, but so I don't know how they play yet, but I'm just going to go ahead and start raising a bunch of pots and trying to create a little action. So nothing on that flop. I'm just going to follow up with $1.75 into $2.65 pot. Okay, so Poker Mom looks horrible. Limping in all over the place. Quick call. Just going to continuation bet. So it looks like a typical loose passive. You know, calls you down when he hits anything, folds when he doesn't, limps in, wants to see cheap flops, yada yada. Very, very easy to make easy money off of. So hopefully Godwad, who goes broke with anything, flops something here, because I'm sure I'll get his whole stack. So that's a good sign. So I'm going to go ahead and bet close to pot. I'll bet exactly pot because I want to try to get all the money in. Yeah, he folded. What I was doing there on the turn by betting pot was I wanted to set the pot size up right for a river shove. So if I bet less than pot, I wouldn't be able to get all the money in against Godwad on the river. So that actually brings up an interesting concept. I think it's very important to make sure to size your bets to where, you know, if you want to get all the money in, you can. So you don't want to have to make this huge overbet in order to get all the money in. You want to make, you know, good sized bets that have the best chance of getting called. Actually, I did that Jack-8 suited I raised kind of out of instinct. That probably wasn't the best because we're just trying to push hands for value here on the left side of the screen. So I'm just going to give up on that. In the Queen 5, I'm going to make a little squeeze. But yeah, it's very important to always try to pay attention to the pot size and make sure the pot size is correct to where you can get all the money in if need be. And so what I was doing there on the turn was setting up the pot so that way I could get all the money in on the river. So I think the pot was like 6 and I was betting pretty much 6, so then it would be 18, and I think he was going to have around 18 left, so I could bet the pot on the river. I'm going to call with the 8s here for set odds. So that was the plan there. So we're raising a bunch of pots here on the right. I don't know if anybody's noticing or picking up on that, but pretty much running over this table right now. What I normally do is raise about 4 times the blind. So when there's a limper, I add his blind and then add that to my raise size. So I would normally raise to $1, and he limped for a quarter, so I just added that to my raise. So I made my raise $1.25. And basically you're just trying to cut down on his odds for calling. You don't want to give him attractive odds to call. You're also building a pot in position. Should you want to play a big pot, it's much easier when you've swelled it more pre-flop, which, you know, kind of compounds on the flop. Turn and river just makes the bets larger just because of that extra little bit sometimes pre-flop. So again, same thing with ace-3 suited there. I just feel like against an earlier position raise that the hand just does not play well. If I'm going to play a hand like that, I'd at least prefer to be in position. So here's sort of a marginal spot. I'm going to take a flop here, but certainly folding could be fine. It's more or less just because I'm going to have position. And Godwad is extremely bad. I'm not gonna call here. I do have an inside straight, and I could consider calling and then making a move at some point, but I'm not closing the action, so that was a good argument for me to just let it go. The other thing too are the spades. You know, I could hit the queen of spades and just get myself in a whole lot of trouble. This is a good spot to really represent a hand like ace-king, ace-queen, and maybe get guys to even fold like a jack, but just don't trust that I'm going to get 2 folds here very often, so I'm going to give up on the 2s. Well, I did get a check and a turbo check. We're going to, oh man, I don't know. This just looks, I'm going to pass. It just doesn't, I guess they're not going to really think that deep, but it just doesn't look like I could, you know, I would have bet the flop if I actually had something. But I don't know, maybe if I put $5 out there, it would have worked. So we're going to take a look. So far I played a 2014 style on the screen on the right and a 3321 style. So combined I've played 20 and I've played probably about a 26, maybe like a 26-17 style so far. Normally my VPIP and preflop raise is much closer to each other. So if I might play like say a 25-23 style or an 18-17 style or whatever it is. Normally it's the VPIP and the preflop raise are very similar because I just don't cold call that much. But I think at these tables it's correct to cold call a little more just because I think your implied odds are a little better because guys will go broke so light at these limits. If I take a flop against a good player at a 5-10 game with 6-7 suited and I flop a straight or 4 to the flush or something where I'm going to be getting pretty excited, doesn't mean I'm going to get very much money off of him, even if he does have a hand like pocket jacks or something like that, just because he's just not going to, he's going to logically figure out what I have, most of the time and, make good, correct folds. So here, those folds just aren't going to be happening a whole lot. So I think it's correct to take a lot of those flops and try to crack those overpairs. A lot of the reason why I'm doing this video as well is because I want to kind of get a few numbers with how, with playing a 25 no limit and figuring out what kind of VPIP and preflop raise I have. And so that way, when people ask me in the forums what is a good style or, what are good numbers to have at these limits, I can answer much more intelligently. So again, we're just going to kind of stick with a little more loose aggressive style on the table on the right. Okay, so he raised me $1.50 more, and he's super tight. I can put him on a really big hand here quite often, and I would call with a lot of hands that having good implied odds. If this were Queen Jack suited or like 7-8 suited, I'd be more inclined to call. Queen 8 suited just doesn't. I just don't think it's quite strong enough. Just doesn't make maybe as many hands, big hands that crack big overpairs, like an 8-7 suited would or something like that, or like a small pair. And so I just chose to let that one go. Well, it looks like I'm up about $40, which is a win rate I'd love to replicate at some bigger limits, but hey, $40 is $40. There's a lot of sessions I've walked away from wishing I would have made $40. So I will take it. Okay, so 4-7 offsuit. I don't know enough about J-Heart to squeeze this, so I'm just going to let it go here. And I'm going to raise ace-6 suited from the cutoff. And I just let him have it there with the pair of fours. Good thing I was drawing about dead. Okay, so I'm in about 150 in a $2 pot with ace-6 suited. Just a standard continuation bet. I showed strength before the flop, and I'm just going to continue on with it. One reason I think that this is very important to do is that, first of all, I think that that play in itself shows an immediate profit. I think you get enough hands, I think you get your opponent to fold often enough to make continuation betting about 2/3 of the pot correct. The other thing you're doing is you're sort of protecting yourself for when you do actually have a hand. What I mean by that is that if you're always, if you're raising before the flop a fair amount, which even a tag does relative to these limits, and you're betting on the flop, people know you don't always have hands when you're doing this. So you are more likely to get played back at a little bit when you do actually have a hand like aces or kings. And a lot of people at these limits incorrectly assume that you're a little maybe wild or crazy and that you're a bluffer just because you raise before the flop and you bet on the flop sometimes with nothing. And people see this and they assume that when you're putting your whole stack in, you're also doing it with nothing. And I mean, you can just get paid off so well in these, at these limits, because people sort of incorrectly see you as more of a bluffer than you actually are. And the reality is that this sort of tight style that does include a pre-flop raise with less than ace-king, ace-queen, jacks and above, and includes following up with continuation bets, is more or less a sort of style where you're making inexpensive bluffs. You're raising your dollar pre-flop, you're betting, $2 on the flop, stuff like that. But you're not putting your whole stack in unless you mean business. And I just really noticed when I was playing these lower limits. With a full house here, I'm going to go ahead and bet it and try to protect my hand here. Yeah, I noticed a lot with these limits that people, they see you raising before the flop, they see you betting on the flop. They just sort of incorrectly assume that because you do that, you must also be bluffing on the turn and river. And the reality is your charade is done. Once you get called on the flop, you're done. You're pretty much shutting down with the tag style. And so, if money's going in on the turn and river, you have a hand, but they just don't ever seem to pick up on that. And you can get them to call you down very lightly just based on the fact that you tend to show a lot of strength at times, pre-flop and on the flop. So I definitely highly recommend always making continuation bets. Maybe not always, but 9 times out of 10. And into one person, not if you get called in 4 spots, don't just blindly throw money into the pot with jack high on a hopeless board that your bluff will never work. Just stick to bluffing into one person, sometimes 2, I guess, but for the most part just one other person, and again, it just kind of sets up your image a little bit. You're not a wild man, but you're not a complete rock either, so that way you can get action when you do have hands. I have a bottom end of a straight here. He leads out for the pot. I'm not closing the action. I kind of like just getting out here. I could be drawing dead for all I know. He might have 8-9. He might have a better draw, like 2 and 8, high straight, and you know, I might be getting check raised by Godwad. You know, for all we know, he has middle pair and he's gonna check raise all in or something. So let's take a look. So okay, so we're at 22-17 now on the table on the right through 62 hands, and 27-16 on the table on the left. So actually not a whole lot different from my normal numbers. So interesting. I would have thought that I would have been, well, I guess I should take that back. It's quite a bit different than my normal numbers because my VPIP is 27 here and the preflop raise is 16. I'm never more than a couple points apart, so I guess that's the difference there, but it looks like I can still play about the same hands. Ace Queen here, he's very tight. I'm just going to call, and I'm just going to give up. Sometimes I'll call there. Mostly I'll 3-bet. Someone this tight, I'm worried that my hand, first of all, doesn't fare that well against his range, and if I do get called in ace flops and gets action, it's going to be from ace king. So made kind of a tight play there, but kept out of trouble. I'd more or less like to be running him over, not you know, being on the defense too much with him. So I get called here with the ace-9. I picked up a 9 high flush draw. I don't think I'm going to consider firing a second barrel there. And he quick checks again. I really see him with like Jack 10 or King Jack or something like that here. I don't think he's going to fold it. And you know, betting is the only way I can win, but I don't think he's going to fold it, so I'm not going to try to win it. Okay, so I had the best hand. No need to bluff if you have the best hand, right? Yeah, I don't like his call there really. Ace-8, I'm going to go ahead and open here. I don't really like to chase gut shots out of position, but I'm glad some people do. You know, it'd be one thing if he had a plan later in the hand for trying to take it away. Like if he were just going to check call the flop, lead the turn, something like that, some sort of plan. But he was just calling basically with the intention of, you know, hoping against all hope that a 10 was going to come and he was going to, you know, bust me or something. But I just don't, you know, I don't. It's not something I would advocate there. I mean, especially on that board when I've sort of represented a big hand like ace-king, and that 10 might end up getting him in a world of trouble. So pretty deep. I mean, 8-7, he's a bad player. I don't see any reason to fold here. So I fought middle pair, and he bets 150 into 1. I mean, I think I should just call here just to kind of see what develops, and also just because I could spike something like a 7 and maybe get his whole stack. And he bets pot again. I mean, he could very well be bluffing me here, but I'm just gonna let it go. I don't have any outs if he does have a queen, so you know, that was more or less a hope. Just that was a call in hopes he would give up, or in hopes that I would hit like an 8 or a 7 on the turn and try to play a big pot with him. So it looks like we're about a little over 40 minutes in to the movie, or to the video, I should say. This wouldn't be much of a movie. It'd probably get like a 0 star, 2 thumbs down. But yeah, the video, a little over 41 minutes now into the video, and I think I'm getting a lot of hands in here, so I might go like a couple orbits and then we'll call it good. So this guy's screen name here is Perfect Poker. I'm going to give him the King Jack. Something tells me he plays a very tight style. I bet you he thinks he plays perfect. Like he raises good hands. He bets, he bets for value and stuff like that. Folds when he doesn't have anything. I don't know. I just kind of made that up, but I had kind of a feeling that's the case. So that might let me play. Maybe that, just it's funny little things like that you pick up. Like I might actually make a decision a little bit based on that screen name right there. Okay, so Godwad is just going nuts here. He's just so excited with his min raise. I'm going to make it 250 and try and really swell this pot. No. I mean, if I was going to play with a big pot with him, I had to start by making it big pre-flop. As much as I hate to lose him by potentially raising him too much, at the same time I'm out of position. I want to try to get money in pre-flop while I'm definitely a favorite, and also swell that pot because I'd really like to get him when he's 160 blinds deep. Yeah, I mean, just doing some thinking and stuff, I mean, you're playing 8 tables of these limits, it's considered a micro limit on PokerStars, and still, I bet you, if you're super, a really good player, I don't recommend playing these limits, obviously, but just because you can make even more money somewhere else, but I bet you could still make a lot of money at these 25 no limit tables. Play 8 tables and win 6 or 7 or more big bets. Probably add up quite nicely. Of course, not everyone probably can play 8 tables. I guess I'm kind of a freak of nature when it comes to that stuff. Not everyone wants to do it 100 hours a day either. So I think I'm going to take the auto post blinds off and finish out my free hands and wrap it up. I'd be really interested to hear what a lot of people think. I truthfully have never actually played this limit, and I kind of on the fly sort of tried to, well, I mean, I spent some time preparing for the video, but basically just try to come up with a strategy that would work well for these games. And I really look forward to hearing what you guys have to say, hopefully in the forums. And just tell me what you think maybe about some of the plays I made. I guess not a whole lot came up. I won that stack with the, I think it was the Kings against Godwad. So that was a big pot. That was maybe a little bit controversial, just going all in there. But yeah, I'd just like to hear what you guys say. And I'm certainly not necessarily a expert at beating these games, but I hopefully think I came up with a good, solid strategy for these, and I had some good results, so that's nice. So I'm just going to follow with $1.50 into 225 here. So yeah, that worked there nice. But again, I just look forward to hearing you guys' comments on the video, and I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope it gives you some more insight on how to beat. I think that this applies pretty nicely to 50 no limit as well. So again, I hope this helped you guys, and this is Leatherass for StoxPoker.com.